Right now, somewhere on this planet, two people are nervously texting each other, completely overthinking punctuation. Someone is staring at their screen, wondering whether ending a message with a period makes them come across as cold or hostile. Someone else is sending a meme instead of saying what they actually mean, because a meme is safer, less exposed, less frightening. And somewhere underneath all of that, both of them are absolutely terrified of being rejected. Now here's the question that should genuinely keep you up at night. Did cavemen go through this too? Around 3.5 million years ago, our ancestors weren't even fully human yet. We're talking Australopithecus, small-brained, bipedal, probably not winning any awards for philosophical thinking anytime soon. Walking upright, yes. Writing poetry about the experience, absolutely not. But here's something fascinating that even most science teachers gloss over. Even at that primitive stage, scientists have uncovered evidence of a dramatic shift in social behavior, a shift that would eventually lead, after millions of years of trial and error and failed situationships, to everything we now recognize as love. Before bipedalism fully took hold, our primate ancestors looked more like gorillas. Massive males, considerably smaller females, one dominant silverback controlling access to mates through pure physical intimidation. Essentially ancient toxic masculinity, but with more chest beating and far fewer social media posts about it. But something shifted when we stood up. As our ancestors moved toward full bipedalism, the size gap between males and females, what scientists call sexual dimorphism, began shrinking. Males weren't growing grotesquely large relative to females anymore. And that's actually enormous news that almost nobody discusses, because in the animal kingdom, the degree of physical size difference between males and females is one of the clearest indicators of what kind of mating system a species operates on. A massive size gap points to a harem-based system. One male, many females, constant violence. Closer in size usually signals pair bonding, sustained relationships, cooperation, fidelity. At least in principle. Put differently, as our ancestors began walking upright, the biological foundation for something resembling love started taking shape, not instantly, not neatly, but it began. And that is genuinely wild to sit with. The moment your ancestor rose onto two legs 3.5 million years ago, they were, without any awareness of it, taking the first physical step toward one day loving someone. One of the most important and underappreciated discoveries in the entire story of prehistoric romance is something called mate provisioning. It sounds like a dry economics term. It is, in fact, one of the oldest love languages ever identified. Here's what unfolded. Around 1.8 million years ago, with the emergence of Homo erectus, something new appeared in the archaeological record. Evidence of systematic food sharing. And not just communal sharing with the whole group. Evidence of males going out to hunt or forage and bringing food back specifically for specific females and their offspring. Not everyone. Specific individuals. From an evolutionary biology standpoint, this behavior only makes sense under one condition. The male needs some degree of confidence that the children he's feeding are biologically his. Otherwise, from a purely selfish genetic perspective, why bother? Why burn your energy and take those risks for someone else's children? Which means pair bonding was already happening. A sustained, preferential, exclusive-ish relationship between two specific people. An understanding, however unspoken, however grunted, that you are mine and I am yours. Congratulations. You just witnessed the prehistoric invention of bringing someone dinner. Think about that for a moment. This isn't metaphorical. This isn't poetic license. The literal origin of the romantic gesture of providing for your partner, of going out into a dangerous world and returning with something meant specifically for them, is 1.8 million years old. It predates language. It predates fire control. It predates everything we typically associate with human civilization. And in a world where a hyena might ambush you on the way home, or you might fall into a river, or get into a violent confrontation with a rival group, choosing to spend your limited energy on one specific person is actually deeply and genuinely romantic. It just also happens to involve a dead antelope, but we don't judge. Now let's get into the material that genuinely stopped me in my tracks when I first encountered it, because food wasn't the only way ancient humans expressed romantic preference. Let's talk about ornamentation. Around 100,000 years ago, and some evidence pushes this even further back, humans began doing something that had never occurred before in the entire history of life on Earth. They started decorating themselves. Pierced shells worn as necklaces found at sites across North Africa. Ochre, a red and yellow mineral pigment, rubbed onto skin in deliberate patterns. Carved ivory beads. Feathers incorporated into clothing or worn in the hair. Jewelry, essentially. Personal decoration, aesthetic self-expression. And the question evolutionary biologists have spent decades wrestling with is why. Why would a human being already preoccupied with finding enough calories to survive, avoiding apex predators, maintaining social bonds within the tribe, and not dying from an infected scratch? Why would that person spend time and energy making themselves look appealing? The leading answer is sexual selection, and it was Charles Darwin himself who first articulated this idea that many traits in animals evolve not because they aid survival, but because they help attract mates. The peacock's tail is the textbook example. Completely useless for survival, actually makes you more visible to predators, but extraordinarily effective at attracting peons. Human ornamentation operates the same way. You decorate yourself to signal I am creative. I have the cognitive ability to imagine what doesn't yet exist and bring it into reality. I have the physical skill to craft something beautiful. I have enough resources that I can afford time spent on aesthetics. I am, in short, a high-quality mate. Sound familiar? It should, because we still do this. We dress up for dates. We get our hair done. We carefully curate which photos appear on our profiles. The specific ornaments have changed. Shells have become diamonds. Ochre has become foundation. But the fundamental impulse driving the behavior is identical. Completely, perfectly identical. But here's the detail that actually stopped me cold when I first came across it. When archaeologists discover beads made from the same specific shells at sites hundreds of kilometers apart, different groups, different regions, different ecological zones entirely, it suggests these objects were being traded, passed along networks of human contact across vast distances, which means these objects carried value, social, symbolic, relational value, which means someone 100,000 years ago received a gift, an object that had traveled far, an object someone chose specifically for them. The world's first Sai saw this and thought of you. I genuinely cannot think about that too long without feeling something. Let's take a moment to dismantle one of the most persistent myths about prehistoric romance. The idea that ancient human mating was essentially just biggest, strongest male wins. Everyone else deal with it. This is the model you encounter in bad action movies, lazy documentaries, and every conversation with someone who uses evolutionary biology to justify being awful. And while male competition absolutely existed, we have the fractured bones to prove it. The dominant male takes all model is a wildly oversimplified and largely inaccurate picture of how human pair bonding actually evolved. Here's the core reason. Humans are what biologists call cooperative breeders. Raising a human child is, from a biological standpoint, almost comically demanding and resource intensive. A human infant is born in a state of near total helplessness that would be frankly embarrassing by any other mammal's standards. A baby deer walks within hours. A baby chimp physically clings to its mother within days. A human baby needs someone to manage essentially everything for it for years. And even after that, the dependency continues for an extraordinary duration. This creates an evolutionary situation where one parent raising children alone produces significantly worse outcomes than two parents working together. The math is unforgiving. But parental investment isn't just pleasant to have. It dramatically improves offspring survival rates. And this changes everything about what you're selecting for in a partner. If you're a female in this environment, you don't simply want the male with the largest muscles. You want the male who will stay, who will bring food back consistently, who will help carry things during pregnancy, who will protect not just explosively in a dramatic moment, but steadily over years. You're not selecting purely for strength. You're selecting for reliability, for loyalty, for what we might as well call commitment. And if you're a male, the calculation shifts too. You're not simply trying to mate with as many females as possible. You're investing in a partnership, a long-term cooperative arrangement. You want someone with whom you can build something that lasts. This is the evolutionary origin of love's deeper dimension. Not just lust, not just attraction, but attachment, the particular, almost irrational desire to be with this specific person. Not just any viable candidate, the feeling that one specific human has become irreplaceable in a way that simply defies logic. Love is a survival strategy, one of the most simultaneously cynical and beautiful ideas in all of science. Okay, but here is the question I know has been forming in your mind this entire time. Sure, the behaviors existed, the pair bonding, the provisioning, the ornamentation. But did ancient humans actually feel anything, or was all of it just unconscious biological programming? Were there actual emotions, actual longing, actual heartbreak. This is where things become both fascinating and, honestly, a little devastating. We can't put an ancient human inside a brain scanner. We can't ask Homo erectus to describe what it feels like to miss someone, but we have clues, and some of them are extraordinary. First, the neurological evidence. By roughly 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had essentially the same brain architecture we carry today. The limbic system, the brain's emotional core, responsible for attachment, fear, pleasure, grief, longing, was fully formed and fully operational. The neurochemical systems that produce what we experience as love, dopamine flooding the reward circuits when we see someone we're drawn to, oxytocin generating the deep bond of attachment, vasopressin driving the protective possessiveness we feel toward partners. All of it was already in place. The hardware existed, which means the software almost certainly ran on it. The feelings were there. But then there's the Shanidar cave evidence, and this one lands differently. In the 1950s, archaeologists excavating Shanidar cave in what is now Iraq uncovered the remains of a Neanderthal man. Not just any Neanderthal, one who had clearly lived with severe, debilitating disabilities. A withered, likely non-functional right arm injured or deformed early in life. Healed fractures indicating major trauma. Probable vision impairment in one eye. The kind of injuries that, under any pure survival of the fittest scenario, should have resulted in death long before. But he hadn't died young. The bones showed he had survived for decades after sustaining these injuries. Years and years of survival in one of the harshest environments imaginable, as someone who couldn't hunt, couldn't gather effectively, couldn't contribute the physical labor that prehistoric life demanded. He survived because other people kept him alive, chose to feed him, chose to protect him, chose to spend their limited resources maintaining the life of someone who couldn't immediately give anything back. This is not survival instinct. This is not logical resource optimization. This is care for the sake of caring. This is attachment that persists past usefulness. This is, at its core, love in the broadest and deepest sense of the word. And Neanderthals, let's not forget, shared approximately 99.7% of their DNA with us. They interbred with Homo sapiens. If you're of non-African descent, you are carrying Neanderthal DNA in your genome right now. These were not alien creatures. They were cousins. Close cousins. If they could love like that, and the evidence very strongly suggests they could, then the emotional life of ancient Homo sapiens was almost certainly richer, deeper, and more familiar to us than we have ever given it credit for. Let's talk about jealousy, because no conversation about love is complete without acknowledging its shadow. Jealousy is not flattering. Nobody lists it as their finest quality, but it is ancient, and understanding why it exists actually illuminates a great deal about how prehistoric love functioned. The evolutionary logic isn't complicated. If you've formed a pair bond with someone and you're investing enormous time and resources into raising children together, children who carry your genetic lineage, then any threat to that bond represents a direct threat to your evolutionary future. The brain responds like it's an emergency. Hormones surge, attention narrows, behavior turns protective, sometimes aggressively so. Cross-cultural studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer societies, which offer our most reliable window into prehistoric social dynamics, consistently show that a significant portion of male violence is tied to mate competition and perceived infidelity. This isn't a modern pathology. This is ancient wiring. But here's the other side of that coin, because it matters. The same wiring that generates jealousy also produces fidelity. The same attachment system that makes you reactive to threats also makes you genuinely devoted to your partner. Vasopressin, one of the key neurochemicals of pair bonding, produces not just possessiveness but loyalty, protectiveness, the drive to maintain the bond not through control but through presence and commitment. So when you feel jealous, genuinely, irrationally, uncomfortably jealous, you are running a program approximately 200,000 years old. You are not broken, you are simply ancient, which is either comforting or deeply unsettling, depending on your perspective. And honestly, it's probably both at once. Let me tell you about music, because this might be my favorite part of the entire story. The oldest confirmed musical instruments ever recovered are flutes carved from vulture bone and mammoth ivory, discovered in caves in southwestern Germany, dated to approximately 40,000 years ago. They are genuinely beautiful objects, precisely constructed, deliberately designed to produce specific sounds. But 40,000 years is almost certainly not when music began. It's simply when the instruments became durable enough to survive in the ground. Percussion made from wood, voice, body percussion. Instruments built from perishable materials leave nothing behind for archaeologists to uncover. The true origin of music stretches back much, much further, and music matters enormously in the story of love because it is the universal emotional technology of human connection. Every single human culture on Earth, without exception, uses music in courtship, singing to attract a mate, dancing together, which is synchronized movement and a powerful signal of physical and social compatibility, using melody and rhythm to communicate emotional states that words either can't reach or haven't yet evolved to handle. Darwin himself proposed that music evolved primarily as a mechanism for sexual selection, that our ancestors developed musical ability for the same reason peacocks developed elaborate tails, to attract, to impress, to communicate I have something worth choosing. What this means in practical terms is extraordinary. 40,000 years ago, and almost certainly long before that, someone was serenading someone else, sitting beside a fire in a cave in Ice Age Europe, playing a bone flute, watching someone across the flames, using sound to cross the impossible distance between two nervous, hopeful, terrified human beings, using music to say I feel something. I made this for you. Do you feel it too? Let's take a moment to address the monogamy question because it always comes up and the answer is genuinely interesting. The evidence points to what evolutionary biologists call socially monogamous with some facultative polygyny, which is academic language for people mostly paired up one-on-one. Those pairs were socially recognized and culturally reinforced, but it wasn't rigidly universal, and the edges were always somewhat messy. The slight size difference between human males and females suggests our mating system sits somewhere between the full polygyny of gorillas and the near-perfect monogamy of gibbons. Biologically, we're in the middle. Socially, though, that's where culture and emotion do the heavy lifting that pure biology leaves incomplete. What we know from anthropological surveys of hunter-gatherer cultures worldwide is that while many theoretically permit polygyny as an option, the vast majority of actual relationships in practice are pair bonds. Most people are in a committed, one-on-one partnership most of the time. Those partnerships are recognized by the community, often ritualized, and protected by social norms. Ancient love wasn't perfect. It wasn't always faithful. The evidence of conflict and jealousy and violence makes clear it was messy and painful and human in all the ways that word implies. But the pair bond, two people choosing each other, building something together, raising children together, protecting each other, was the dominant social unit, the foundation on which everything else was constructed. Here's where it all converges. Here's what I actually want you to carry with you. Love is not a modern invention. It is not a product of civilization or literacy or leisure time or romantic poetry. It is not something humans developed after achieving food security and enough breathing room to contemplate their feelings. It was there first. It was there before cities, before agriculture, before language, before fire control. It was there at the very beginning of what it means to be human. And the argument can be made, seriously and with substantial scientific support, that love is actually one of the things that's made us human. Pair bonding drove the development of language, because communicating with a partner requires more than grunting can offer. It drove the development of music and art, because new tools for expression and attraction had to be invented. It drove the expansion of cooperation and community, because love for a partner extends into love for children, and love for children extends into love for their world. And suddenly you're building a society. Love didn't follow human civilization. Human civilization followed love. That Homo sapiens sitting in East Africa 100,000 years ago, watching someone across the fire, feeling something without yet having words for it. Something warm and confusing and terrifying and magnetic and completely irrational. They were feeling exactly what you have felt, what you will feel again, what every human being who has ever lived in every era and every place has felt. The shell necklace they crafted, the food they carried back through danger, the music they played into the darkness, the person they chose to stay beside, different details. Same feeling. So the next time you're frozen, staring at your phone, paralyzed by whether to use a period or not, or you feel that terrifying, weightless free fall of caring about someone more than you feel comfortable admitting, just know this: you are doing something ancient. Something so old it has no traceable beginning. Something so fundamental to the human experience that it reaches back past language, past tools, past everything that separates us from the creatures we came from. Every single one of your ancestors, going back further than imagination can reach, felt what you are feeling right now. They navigated it imperfectly, messily, sometimes violently, often beautifully, and somehow impossibly against every odd. Through ice ages and droughts and predators and rival tribes, each of them figured it out just enough to keep going, which is why you're here, which is, when you think about it, the most romantic thing I've ever heard.